Joel Klatt joins us live. He was at the game. I don't know. I think the playoffs going to be a blast, but I don't think it's going to solve anything. It's just going to validate stuff, in my opinion. Am I wrong?
Yes. And the reason is because the reason we have this gap, and it's larger than it's ever been before, maybe in the history of college football, is because of the exclusionary nature of the 4-team playoff. And so it may not be fixed right away, Colin. You know, we might not be talking about how, it's totally fixed in the first and second and even third year of the new playoff system. But the fact is that if you look at the history of recruiting and if you look at the history of football, we've seen a separation of the top 6, 7 programs, really, maybe 8, if you really wanted to dial it up. The separation of those programs because of recruiting in the playoff era in the last 9 years. And that's because those were really the only teams that could make a valid argument that they had access to the national championship. Therefore, all the recruits went there. And you see that the data bears that out, and in particular with the 5-star recruits over the last basically decade in college football. And so part of that fix is creating an avenue where other programs can also define themselves as successful and give validity to the claim that you can go and compete for a national championship at those schools. Now, do I think an expanded playoff is going to change who we get as champion? Probably not, in particular in the near term. But expanding the access to the playoff will allow more programs to have validity in recruiting when they're saying you can come here and really compete for a national championship. We've seen teams turn it around quickly because of the transfer portal. All of those things will eventually lead to more parity. Now, will we, again, like I said, change the champion? Maybe, maybe not. But I think that the gap is, in some ways, a direct result of this system that we've been in now for 9 years.
I think Georgia, just my eyes tell me, Georgia's got more good players than Alabama. They've passed them. I think next year they should be favored. Alabama next year has all sorts of questions, notably at quarterback. I think Georgia's the big dog. I think it goes in spurts. You know, we see this. I think Brian Kelly, maybe by next year, they're going to be a top 5 program. But I think Georgia has passed Bama. I think the run, it always ends. I think they'll be good, but Georgia feels more talented to me. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't want to get on here and say that Alabama's run has ended. They are still in the midst of a historic run, which we'll probably never see again. I think you would even admit that, right? Of what we've seen from Alabama over the last 10 and 12 years. Now, if you carve that down into the micro and you say over the last 18, 19 months, who's running college football? It's Georgia. So in the micro, yes, Georgia is the top dog. They are the king of college football right now. And even going into next season, I don't think that none of us will be able to say, like, well, Alabama should be favored over Georgia in the preseason.
No way.
Georgia has earned that. Yeah. They run the sport currently. That doesn't diminish what Alabama is doing, over the last 10 years in the Saban era. But there's no other way to slice this with back-to-back national championships, back-to-back, dominant seasons. This one undefeated. Last year beating Alabama in the national championship game. Yeah. This team, this program, Kirby Smart, runs college football right now. Yeah. And there's no other way to slice it. You cannot make an argument, even if you're Ohio State and you feel like you should have won that game. Even if you're Alabama and you're in the middle of a historic run, Georgia currently runs the sport.
I will say this for Ohio State. If you ask me today, I think 3 teams can go toe-to-toe with each other. I think Bama, Georgia, Ohio State can. Michigan had a great identity and a great Saturday in Columbus. I do think there's limitations at quarterback when you compare Stetson Bennett, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud. J.J. McCarthy's not there. And I know Michigan beat Ohio State. But when I watched Ohio State play Georgia, I'm like, well, they got NFL offensive linemen. They kept Georgia off their quarterback. They can beat anybody. Yeah. I do think next year, I look at all these teams, if Harbaugh bolts, I think next year, Georgia's 1, Ohio State's 2, and Alabama's 3. Is that crazy?
No, I don't think it's crazy. I do think that you have to include Michigan. Because remember, even with the loss in the semifinal, they do have the second best record in college football over those last 18 months that I was just talking about Georgia running the sport. And they're going to be pretty loaded. They did a great job in the transfer portal at the line of scrimmage. They've got young talent that was probably their best talent on their team. Blake Corum is coming back. I actually believe I think Jim Harbaugh is going to be back at Michigan, personally.
Okay.
I think that's above a 50% proposition. I think that he will be the Michigan coach next season. So having said that, I do think that they're going to start in that mix. Okay. Now, whether they can, pull off another Ohio State win, get back to the playoff, remains to be seen. Your point about those three remains, and I believe it's true.
Yeah.
I think that for the majority of the season, up until that Saturday in Columbus, all of us would say like the three best and most talented teams were Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama, right? Even with Alabama's losses and the fact that they didn't play to their standards during the course of the year. And we saw that in the Ohio State-Georgia game. I will tell you this. Next year will feel similar. However, let's not minimize the impact of what the transfer portal is meaning in college football. It's the reason TCU was in this position. It's the reason that USC was able to turn it around, that Washington was able to turn it around. Watch out for a team like here's a Cinderella for next year. And it's maybe not a Cinderella because they just won 10 games. Oregon State might be really good next year. I think we're going to continue to see now with the transfer portal, Colin, we're going to see teams jump up. But your point is accurate. The top will remain. Those four schools are going to have the best teams next year.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting over the Cinderella story. I've been a nice guy for too long. I'm going favorites from this point forward. No more Cinderella stories. I'm not going to be a softie.
Well, then you can't love USC because that's a Cinderella. You can't not play defense and consider yourself a top dog.
USC's just beautiful. They're not a Cinderella. There's a difference there. They're just a beautiful program. All right, Joel Klatt.
They're beautiful and terrible on defense.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.